Good morning, everyone. So we're going to get started right on time today because we do have a lot to cover. And we only have half an hour before the session on persuasive interviewing will start. So I'm not sure how many of you are online right now, but the session is being recorded. So for any of your colleagues who missed this portion of today's lecture, they can definitely get that on Blackboard. So good morning to you, and thank you for submitting your project charters. I have received from all groups except one. Okay, so let's just get started on our persuasive messages. So the objectives of persuasive messages are to persuade your audience. That's the very simple part of it. And you do go through the ACE process. So you're going to analyze what's going on, you're going to compose your message, and you're going to evaluate the message. But what you'll find about persuasive writing, it's a little bit different because you really need to have a very, very strong sense of your audience and almost to evaluate ahead of time where you're really going to go with that particular message. So we're going to cover what are the basic elements of persuasion and the different types of business messages that require persuasion. In particular, today your workshop will cover the interviewing skills, and then you will have an opportunity to book those mock interviews. And then later on within your class, you'll have an opportunity to actually present a 7-minute persuasive argument on a business topic. And those business topics will be due by February 10th with no exception. Okay, thank you. So what is persuasion? Persuasion is the process of influencing your audience to agree with your point of view, your recommendation, your request. And in chapter 8, we talk about those different techniques, but I'm going to add in a lot of my experiences as well, and some of the tips that I think that you will find very helpful as you move forward as management professionals. So what types of messages typically require persuasion? I have not worked in sales for a very long time. My background has really been in a lot of proposal writing to various organizations, foundations, government, various for-profit organizations as well for funding. And so what you'll find is that there are different styles of writing, and within different cultures, whether or not they are amenable to direct communication or direct persuasive messages or indirect messages. I can tell you that probably 9 times out of 10 in North America, the direct messaging is key. But it's interesting when you find yourself, let's say, in an organization that might be a nonprofit organization in social services, or you're working within a clinical environment, they're used to taking histories. And so they build an argument in a very sort of an indirect way. The challenge will come when that type of organization is looking for funding, let's say from one of the large tri-council organizations or a for-profit organization that really wants you to be very direct. And you need to then have someone such as yourself with great communication skills who can help to straddle some of those differences. So as I mentioned, you need to analyze your message. And you need to be very strategic about it. You need to understand the purpose, the desired outcome, the business results. But probably more important than all of that, you really have to understand who is this information going to be received by, and what are their content needs. This is absolutely vital. So in analyzing it, you're looking at the purpose and the outcome and the business result. So one of the questions that you're going to ask yourself is, why are you communicating? You know, really, why are you sending this message to this person? What are their specific needs? What are they going to use that information for? And one of the things that I've always said to my direct reports is that you need to persuade me first. If we're going after program funding or project funding, or we're looking for equipment for capital funding, you need to, if you can't convince me, then I'm not going to be able to convince the funder either. Okay. So it starts with me with very probing questions, as it will with you as well. Whether you're actually working, with a direct report, you're getting that information in, or whether you, in fact, have to sell a particular idea, concept to a board of directors, etc. So, in focusing on those needs, like as I said, you focus on your audience, how they're going to use the information. And some of the arguments that you're going to have to build are either you're going to build those arguments looking at what are all the alternatives. For example, if you are looking to get funding for a particular product, how are you going to convince them that that is the product, or that is the particular model, or you need it at that time? So it's great when you are able to do two things. One, in developing those arguments, come up with what we call refutation, or how do you refute those arguments? Okay, what are the objections to what you're proposing? So that you can then, in anticipating those obstacles, you can then create additional arguments in support of your proposal. Concessions are an admission that an opposing point of view has merit, but does not invalidate your argument. So you'll admit that, yes, these may be some of the counter arguments, but, and then you propose something else. So you need to convincingly show that a problem or an opportunity exists. And is the proposed solution or plan appropriate? Have you addressed all of the objections that you can anticipate? And so it's great sometimes to create advantages and disadvantages, or pros and cons. Or once you develop some of those ideas, you might choose to share it with a colleague or someone who is not invested in this and who really have no idea what you're talking about, but can nevertheless ask you some very pertinent and helpful questions. You must stress the benefits. And is the a message easy to read? Oftentimes people are using many more words than are necessary to convey the message. So you want the message to be concise, you want it to be complete, you want it to be logical, and you want it to be correct. So make sure that if you're including any statistics, that you have checked your facts. I know that in journalism, for example, some of these large companies like New York Times, Washington Post, etc., they have people that are just fact checkers, and I know with the recent election, they had people writing articles on, how many facts did Joseph Biden, for example, air on, and out of 20 things he mentioned, he did well on 17, and some of them were exaggerated and some of them were absolutely wrong, that type of thing. So be very, very clear and accurate in the information that you share, because it can either make it or break it for you. One small error in there can impact your credibility. I've also found that in designing these messages, knowing the culture, of course, is a very important one. Eastern cultures tend to have many more words and the use of what we call flowery language. So that may be very challenging if you are sending a message or you're communicating with someone in North America that wants a very crisp, a very direct approach. It is not considered rude to be concise. So just, again, pay attention to that. So there are three, actually, this slide shows three, but in my mind, there are actually four. And I think most people in communications agree that there are, in fact, 4 basic elements of persuasion. The first element is credibility. And that credibility is linked to what we call the ethos, right? So this is I'm going to give you the English word and then I'm going to give you the Greek word, okay? So credibility is an audience believe that you have the expertise and are trustworthy based on your knowledge, your character, your reputation, and your behavior. So 2 people saying the same things are going to be received differently by an audience depending on that person's, each person's background, on their credibility, on their reputation. It's very important. So to establish credibility, you have to spend time getting to know your audience. Trust is absolutely essential. If it's a proposal, like I was sharing with you earlier, it must provide sufficient background about your team and your expertise. But be careful to not oversell. You need to show that each team member is well qualified. But if substitution becomes necessary, that you can still proceed and create or produce a desirable deliverable. It's very important. So you're going to introduce yourself effectively and you're going to present your ideas clearly. So that's ethos. Now the logos, which refers to the logic, is the
Hello,
rational.
Professor.
Okay.
Uh,
So you need to build a strong argument by starting out with the outcome you desire. And that's if you're using the direct approach. If you're using the direct indirect approach, then you will switch that around. But as I said, most organizations are going to want the direct approach. So you're going to clearly state what your position is, not what your role is, but what it is you desire. Know and share what reasons support that position, and then provide evidence in support of those reasons that you've given. And I would recommend that it be factual or anecdotal. So it had something that happened that you can, link time and place to, or specific individuals. So a scenario or something like that would be anecdotal. You also either want to link metrics, your key performance indicators, any statistics, that type of information. While you don't need to introduce it necessarily in the body of your request, you can either use a footnote or you can put it in an appendix or something along those lines. And any literature, research literature that you have found in support of your argument should also be cited properly in the any document. If it's a formal document, if it's not a formal document, then sometimes you'll just see people will have a little asterisk or footnote at the bottom for any further explanation. But it is important that you do not make baseless claims. This is one of the biggest, if not the biggest mistake that I see in writing. Writers often assume that everyone else has had the same experiences in life or exposure to the same information. Always assume that the reader has no time on their hands, and frequently they do not. So how will you grab and keep their attention? Test your work by summarizing what the benefits will be. Start off trying to summarize things in 100 words, and then 75 words, and so on. How crisp can you make the message without losing the intent of the message? And we did a little bit of that last week when we started to take away some of the extraneous words or the unnecessary words in messages. Figure 8.4, I believe, in your textbook will help you to learn how to construct a logical argument. And then figure 8.6 pinpoints the fallacies that you need to avoid. And you need to know those fallacies so that it's in your mind, and that as you're writing, you're able to recognize if you are in fact using one of those fallacies. And those fallacies are, appealing to popular opinion, hasty generalizations, ignoring the burden of proof, false causes or false analogies, false dilemmas, red herrings, and attacking people, based
Excuse
on
me, Professor.
their own reputation or just simply because you don't agree with them. Okay.
Excuse me.
So we started off with the credibility, which is the ethos. We went to logic, which is the logos. Now we come to the pathos, which is the emotion. And it's important that when you are persuading someone that you appeal to their emotions, you appeal to the common good, you appeal to their sense of humanity. And this will come from knowing your audience. So you have to do your research. And the argument must still be ethical. You can't just appeal to someone, with hoping that they'll have a bleeding heart, but are unethical in what you say. So if you're going for an interview, for example, research the bios of the people who will be interviewing you. Know that company inside out. Study their strategic plan. Look at articles. Get a sense of issues that they might have had. Come up with some potential approaches that you would use, or could use differently to address those problems. So research, I think it's key. It's your A and analyze, and nothing will compensate for having done appropriate research. In your textbooks, I think it's figure 8.8 deals with that. Ethics pertains to the right and wrong in your conduct. And so your message, although it's persuasive, it still needs to be ethical. And you must act according to the rules or standards for that right conduct, especially standards within a profession, whether you are an engineer or a physician or a nurse. Your professional standing, your reputation, working within your scope of practice, and not saying that you can do things that you're not supposed to be doing, for example, are incredibly important. So I know that in the past, I'm not sure if it's still the case, physicians in Canada were not permitted to advertise. And I think that that is still the case. You cannot just sort of advertise your services. You can talk about the opening of a clinic, for example, but you're not really to advertise. And I think that's still the case. So knowing the culture of the organization and your profession and the country in which you're working is exceedingly important, as this could dictate to whom you can persuade, when, and other things that must accompany this. For example, in my work with Indigenous populations, if I were having a meeting with elders, I would have to bring along tobacco as a gift, which is very customary with certain First Nations. Persuading them meant earning their trust, and I can't emphasize that enough. And earning the trust with this particular population would oftentimes take months and sometimes years. And the events and meetings were oftentimes also day-long meetings. They're very ceremonial. And the only way that you will have credibility with this population is to earn their trust over a very, very long time. So that's the pathos. So we've covered the ethos, logos, pathos, and then the last one is kairos. And it's not in the slide because it's, I guess Pearson didn't think it was important, but it is exceedingly important. And kairos, spelled Kairos, refers to the right time. So, but the best logical argument means nothing if it's presented at the wrong time or to the wrong person. And this is an idea that is oftentimes unappreciated, particularly, I think, in the not-for-profit sector. It's easy to believe that, you have a strong cause, you are going to be raising funds for abused children, let's say, the most vulnerable within the population. And so there's a sense that why wouldn't people want to give you money? But making sure that your cause is aligned with the strategy of the organization that you're speaking with or the person that you're speaking with is exceedingly important, because they also have their roles to fulfill. Okay. My cursor is not working for some strange reason now. Oh, there we go. All right. So kairos, very important.
Dr. John.
And then, of course, in appealing to the person's emotions. You definitely want to show your commitment. You want to use powerful language. But I would say be careful about how powerful the language is, because it depends again on your audience. If the language is compelling, that's great. But if it is too powerful, if it's too strong, that might raise a little bit of concern. So I would say that the language has to be appropriate and the tone has to be appropriate for the message in which you are conveying. Obviously, you know, in addressing your emotions, the person's emotions, I think what they have shown here is Maslow's hierarchy of needs, and you know, any appeal at the most basic human needs obviously has a stronger impact than those perhaps at the level of self-actualization, which is something that we all work towards, but not, it is not a basic, a simple basic need. So housing, food, clothing, these sorts of things are your basic needs, and can definitely be used to garner some emotion that is effective for persuading. And recommendations of actions include some of the core elements. We've talked about this generally: establishing that the need exists, show how your solution is effective. Okay, and again, with the direct approach, you want to start off your message with that. You want to grab their attention right at the get-go, sharing where you're going with all of this, so that they are interested enough to continue to read your message. Okay, so after talking about the needs and the benefits, and you have provided arguments to deal with any particular objections, you build on your credibility. Then you build on your credibility, the ethos. Who's doing this work? Why is it necessary that you specifically be the ones to do that? Oftentimes, this is what you'll see is, so what makes your team the right one to choose? You know, especially if you're involved in a competition, there's a request for proposals, and an organization is going through hundreds of those proposals. You know, all of them are fine engineering companies. All of them obviously, you know, have the right skills, their procedures are fine, etc. But why is your team the best one to be chosen? And oftentimes you will get that question, you know, why should we choose you? So understand what your value proposition is, because finding that niche, finding that unique element that helps you to stand out is absolutely key. And you can use that to also construct some of those logical arguments and build appeal from an emotional perspective. I've talked about that, the direct and indirect. If you want to get a better sense of how to do some of those messages or what you want to look out for, figure 8.9 in your textbook shows that very clearly. We won't have time to get into that today because we're going to have to go very quickly into the workshop. And then there are techniques for creating effective messages using a variety of media. So for example, in sales, they have shared the acronym, the AIDA, and I would add the O to that, because you're always going to be looking at outcomes and evaluating. So you want to grab the attention, and different research studies show the length of time that you have to grab someone's attention to be very different. Some people say 7 seconds, some people say 3 seconds. I think it depends on the type of information and the environment in which you're in. But know that grabbing the attention is very important, not just in a sales document, but in any document that you're going to try to persuade someone to do something. So after grabbing the attention, you want to keep their interests. You want to meet the audience needs and share what the benefits are. For desire, you want to overcome any resistance, and you want to overcome that by showing appropriate or sharing appropriate evidence, as well as that sense of urgency, that kairos, Kairos, that appropriate timing, that now is the time to take action. And then after the action, you want to look at what the outcomes are for your audience. You want to evaluate, and I would say as managers within your organizations, not only are you interested in the action, whatever that might be, but you want to evaluate that action, and you want to keep records of that action. And this is very important for what I call organizational assets for the future. You want to know that A was the issue, we took B action, C was the consequence. Okay, so that's kind of like an ABC approach to this. And that information will be then stored in whatever format you have available to you, so that for future projects, or when you're creating products or hiring or whatever, you have a very good sense of what has been working for your organization. So always think about that internal research. When I joined the last organization that I was with, they were not doing any program evaluations at all. And so I ensured that with each new project, we were always applying or including an evaluative component, because with that evaluation component, of course, it allowed us to learn from our experiences and allowed us to continue to understand the complexities and the nuances of the various situations that we moved into, that we experienced, so that we would be effective. So persuasion, obviously, it helps to motivate others. Reminder that your entire team, the vision of your entire team working together, that diversity will promote success. Make sure that there is always an open forum, that people are feeling comfortable enough to contribute to the cause, to give them pride in their work, obviously. I mean, that's probably the number one thing as managers that you'll find, is that each person has their own way of being motivated. And I believe the research is showing that I think it's somewhere between 25 and 35% of the reason why people will be in a particular job has to do with the financial rewards. The majority of the rewards relate to the social experience, being validated by their supervisors, having an opportunity to contribute, being part of a company that is very ethical and has a purpose way beyond just the products or services that they sell, etc. So very important, how to motivate your team. Now, in terms of just a little bit of quick housekeeping before we move on, I received the project charters all except for Team 8, okay? And I did not receive any communication, so I won't go too much into that. You guys can talk to me later about it. Only 16 of you had the textbooks last week when we talked. I'm hoping that more of you have been able to acquire it, and able to then use my lab to practice the various skills. Your self-critique papers will be due next week, Friday. The maximum is 4 pages. I do not accept late papers. That means that anything received after the deadline automatically will receive a 0% out of 10% of your full mark. The persuasive interview, the mock interviews workshop will begin immediately after this lecture. Your persuasive presentation, which will begin in a few weeks, will be 7 minutes long. Your topics must be, your requested topics must be shared with me by February the 10th. Okay, so that's next week. The sooner you hand it in and get approval, the more time you have to get started and get on with the work. The expectation is that you would have improved from part 1 of the course, or the fall course, that section. I will be setting up virtual classrooms for each team so that you can practice and record your presentations. I urge you to use the videos and also maybe even the video recordings on your smartphone. It is 9:30 and now we'll go over to the workshop with Clementa, who is our HR expert. Okay, thank you.